Well, hello. I hope you're having a fantastic day already, and I'm so glad that you are choosing to spend your incredibly valuable time here with us. Today's going to be really interesting conversation. I am really looking forward to it myself. We're going to be talking with Dipal Shah about negotiating to unleash your superhero powers to be able to negotiate your best life. So, welcome, Dipal. It's so good to have you here.
It is so wonderful to be here, Cindy. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And for those who may not know her, Deepal's an intuitive coach and a mind reprogramming expert, which certainly caught my attention. And she really is a catalyst for leaders, for entrepreneurs, and in particular for people who are looking for more purpose, for power, for prosperity. So obviously, as the founder of Women on Purpose, that certainly caught my attention. And her mission is to help people connect with their authentic self, definitely part of our Art of Feminine Negotiation mindset. And she teaches them to amplify their voice, to ignite that fire or rekindle that fire and break through some of that subconscious conditioning that holds us back so that we can become more unapologetically empowered. So I'm sure you can see why I wanted her here. So much of that is very much in line with Art of Feminine Negotiation and our mission here. So how did you come to this type of work, Deepa?
Oh, goodness. Well, I used to work in the pharmaceutical industry. I was a pharmaceutical rep selling
My.
legal drugs. And I did that for about a decade, over a decade. And
Yeah.
I thought that was my life's purpose. I wanted to be in the management position and really have an impact on people. But 12 years into it, I lost my purpose
Yeah.
and I couldn't believe it myself that I lost my purpose. I mean, here I am at 36,
Yeah.
37. You think your life is all in order, and all of a sudden you're having a meltdown
Yeah.
and and you're tired and you're just kind of twiddling your thumbs going, what am I going
Hmm.
to do if I leave this, everything that I already know? What am I going to do next?
Yeah.
And so I left it to faith and I said, you know what am I going to do now? Right? We always think about the future of what am I going to do next? What's my life going to look like? But what if we just focus on the now and
Yeah.
say, okay, well, what do I want to do now? And that's exactly the step that I took. And
Yeah.
I said, well, I've got two young ones. I would love to spend time with them
Yeah.
and be more involved in their life because when my oldest one was growing up, I wasn't a part of her life
Yeah.
because I had to, you know, make
Yeah.
money. I had to put a
Yeah.
roof over our head. And it was really important to me to have that connection with my
Yeah.
girls. And so I took that time to do that. But of course, for me, I cannot sit still.
Yeah.
I'm like my dad. And so my dad, he went back to school at the age of 70. Okay. So that's
Wow.
the whole
That's
story in
impressive.
itself.
I love that.
But so I'm like my dad, I'm just very ambitious and I knew that I wanted something more in my
Yeah.
life and I tapped into natural healing.
Yeah.
And I started also doing more personal development because I
Yeah.
felt like I needed that for my
Yeah.
mental, physical, spiritual well-being.
Yeah.
And that part of you that always feels lost, like, who am I?
Yeah.
Why am I here?
Yeah.
My 3-year-old would ask me that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, when you can't answer that, it's kind of like, okay, well,
Yes.
we need to search that too, right? And
Yeah.
how do we live authentically? Like, how do I stop hiding myself? How do I stop confining myself to everyone else and people pleasing? I was
Yeah.
just so tired of it.
Yeah. What you're
Yeah.
describing is not at all unusual. My gosh. And thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing it because I think so many people and women in particular, we do what's expected of us in life. That
Yes.
deep-seated conditioning sort of pushes us towards definitions of success, so-called success, that actually don't fit well with a great life balance, right? To be able
I
to
agree.
really fully embrace it. And we end up not pursuing our purposes. When we're young, things that we thought really filled us with passion, we're told, oh, that's not realistic or that's not this. And then we follow a particular path and we feel suddenly at this particular point in life like there's something missing, right? And we've
Yeah,
got
you hit a roadblock.
that total middle
Yeah.
ground. So I really get that. So let's talk about mindset for a moment because I often say that I think probably our first and most important negotiation is negotiating our mindset. I know you do a lot of that work. So tell us a little bit, let's start teasing out like how can we negotiate our mindset to maximize our opportunities for real success, not that sort of competitive conditioned success that we've come to expect.
Yeah, so I see success in many different ways, but one of the most important ways is health,
Yeah,
right? I feel like health is wealth. I
yeah,
have taken many different
I love
avenues
that.
in my own health.
Yeah,
And like I said, personal development was one. But the other thing I find that women do is neglect their health because they're taking care of everyone
yeah,
else and being so accommodating. And so for me, that is what I started to hone in on. And that success with my health of my body transformation, like I did a whole transformation last year, and I went from 114 pounds to 97 pounds.
whoa, wow,
Now I'm at a healthy 110,
yeah,
but it's healthy weight,
yeah,
more muscle. And
yeah,
I had to realize, what is my reasoning for doing that? What is my why?
yeah,
And when you dive deep into that why, you will find success in anything that you
yeah,
do,
yeah.
right?
And what a
So
beautiful transition for you as well. I must say, like as you were talking about the pharmaceutical industry, that is such a tough industry for a whole host of reasons that we'll have to have another episode on that we can unpack some of that, Deepa. But I love that you went from that sort of pharmaceutical industry to this natural healing epiphany, if you will. I think that's such a beautiful transition.
I did, because I couldn't find the answers,
Yeah,
Cindy. I couldn't find the answers to my own health problems. I
yeah,
mean, here I was as a pharmaceutical rep, I had access to every drug possible,
yeah,
right? And the funny thing is, here's the ironic thing. I was calling on gastroenterologists, right? They are the digestive
yeah.
doctor. Well, guess what problem I had that I was dealing with? Digestive issues. But yet there was no solution.
Yeah,
And so I knew that the body has this capability of healing itself. I just didn't know how. And
yeah,
so every door that opened for me, as soon
yeah,
as I said, you know what? Yes, I want to heal myself naturally. And that's the first thing that I realized we have to do. We have to be open
yes,
to anything that wants to come. Once we ask the universe, say, okay, I really want to heal my health.
yeah.
Give me the answers. You can't sit there and negotiate and be like, no, that doesn't sound
That's
very
so true.
right. We got to get the logical mind out and
Yeah,
really tap into our intuition, because that is our GPS in
yeah,
our life.
yeah.
It is an innate power, superpower. And I don't want people to forget that,
Yeah.
because I feel like we put it to the side and we
Yeah.
constantly tell that little voice inside of us, no, you're wrong.
Well, and I
Because,
want to stop and really put a pin in that for our listeners because I mean,
yeah,
historically, we had say if you look back, whether our indigenous people as well, like we had such strong intuition, so
yeah,
such powerful intuition, and somewhere along the line, we allowed ourselves to let go of it and let go of it and let go of it, and be indoctrinated with all of these less natural sort of modalities, if you will, for how we're supposed to live our life, and everybody in this little robotic mode following it. So I am a huge believer in tapping back into our intuition. Find ways to rediscover yourself so that you can start trusting that intuition as you negotiate your best life, frankly. It's so sorry to
exactly.
stop you. I just want to really put a pin in that. I think people don't talk about it enough, and
They
it's at
don't.
the heart of everything.
Yeah, and I love teaching women how to tap into their intuition to get the answers from their body so that they could
Yeah,
heal their body and take care of
yeah,
themselves. I mean, look at Oprah Winfrey,
yeah,
right? Look at, in the past, Winston Churchill, Steve Jobs, like all these great leaders use their intuition to make decisions
yeah.
about business or even personally.
Yeah.
But
Now, do you
if
have a
you
little strategy you can share with our listener, just as you were saying that about teaching how to tap it? Because I'm sure a lot of people listening are like, well, if I've forgotten how to do it, Cindy, how am I supposed to? So, any little tips or tricks that you have to help kickstart that process, maybe for our listeners to be able to
Oh my
tap back
gosh,
in?
yes. I love, like I said, this is my passion, right?
Yeah,
So here we go. Okay, because I mean, and as I was saying, I mean, intuition goes so far back
yeah,
as Aristotle's time
yeah,
that we already have that innate power. So first of all, I want you to acknowledge that. I want you to say to yourself, I have intuitive abilities,
yeah,
right? Once we say that, we're saying, okay, I'm opening up this beautiful
yeah,
superpower and I'm believing in it that I have it. Now, I want you to close your eyes. And take a nice deep breath in and out. And maybe there's a question that you have in your mind that you've been thinking about, whether it's personal, it's career related, relationship related, whatever it is. It's been bothering you for a couple of days, weeks, months. Think about that question and ask a yes or no question about that. And notice what impression you get first. What does your body do? Do you get a yes? Do you get a no? What's the very first impression? Now open your eyes. When we get quiet, that's when the answers come to us.
Mm,
And I feel like we don't get quiet enough because there's so much noise outside of us.
yeah.
And this is becoming our inner noise.
Yeah.
So, Cindy, it's time to tune
Yeah.
in and tune out everything else.
That
Because
was
the number one
powerful.
complaint
Yeah.
that my clients come with is my mind chatters so much, or I
Yes.
can't meditate because
Yeah.
my thoughts keep coming through. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's okay. They're supposed to.
Yeah.
You can't stop that. But
Yeah.
how entangled are we getting
Yeah.
into our thoughts?
Yeah.
That's where the issue lies.
Yeah. That was a beautiful exercise, Deepa. Like I must say, even just allowing ourselves that small moment of space and grace, because you're right, we don't. And as women in particular, I find, I think generally as a society, but we are in such a to-do with a hundred balls bouncing in the air. And we've almost become a bit martyred about it, right? That we pride ourselves on how many balls we could juggle at the same
I
time.
know.
And I want to really put a pin for our listeners. Notice how Deepo started. She had said about to say out loud that, this recognition that I have deep intuitive powers. And, our brain tries to give us what it thinks we want, but we are so conditioned with so much negative stuff in our life that our brain then goes looking for evidence of that. So when we tell ourselves, oh, I can't trust my intuition, our brain's going to look for examples of that and it becomes a vicious circle. So even just starting with that simple thing, I have deep intuitive powers, your brain will go, oh, this is different. Let me find some evidence of that. And it'll go out there and start helping. So,
It is. It's all about rewiring the brain, whether
yeah,
you want to change a habit, a behavior,
yeah,
you want to, whatever you want to do. It's all
yeah,
about setting your intention first and then getting quiet. And one of the things I like to do, Cindy, I actually love. I'm not going to say I like because I am crazy about taking my walks, and taking walks in nature gives me so many downloads. And what I
yeah,
mean by that is gives me answers to my life.
yeah, yeah.
And every question I'll just ask and I'll just be open to receiving. And it comes so quickly
Yes.
that that hour walk feels like it's only been a 20-minute walk.
And we underestimate the power of nature. Like, my goodness, Mother Earth is around us even as simple if you're somewhere, you can't tell me that you can't go out and find somewhere where you can find a little patch of grass, take off your shoes and socks, and just ground yourself. I don't care if you think it sounds hippy dippy. It
Yeah,
turns out all the stuff people thought was crazy hippie stuff from the 60s, most of it has scientific evidence about it. Turns out they had it right. So
exactly.
go hug a darn tree, or if you're too shy to embrace it fully, just put your hands, feel the texture of the bark, and allow yourself to truly feel the energy. Stay holding that until you. I think that's so important.
Yeah.
And it allows us, I think, to tap into those powers. And let's speak about superpower for a moment. Like, what are some tips you have for how do we discover our superpowers, Deepa?
Right. So, one of the superpowers that I really love is emotional regulation.
Mm,
Okay. I talk about three superpowers. One is emotional regulation, recognizing our thoughts and the emotion that goes with the thought
yes.
and the reaction of that.
Yeah.
Because thoughts plus emotions equal reaction, right?
Yeah.
How are we responding to our thoughts and emotions? A lot of times we skip the emotional part,
Yeah.
right? So, if you have a thought in your mind, like, "Ooh, I need to answer this email." So the emotion might be urgency or stress,
Yeah.
right? Just by looking at the subject.
Yeah. Yes.
And
Been
then the
there.
response might be, I'll just do it later.
Yeah.
And then you forget about it, or you'll answer it right away, but you don't even know what you're writing because
Yeah.
you're kind of in stress mode. So when we start to slow down and we use our body as a gauge to gauge our emotions, that's going to help us with utilizing our thoughts better, because we have 6,200 thoughts per day.
I know, isn't that crazy?
Imagine, yeah, each of them are attached to an emotion,
Yeah.
but we don't recognize the emotions because we're so used to, we have made stress our best friend.
Yeah.
If we're not stressed, we don't know what to do with ourselves.
Yeah.
So, emotional regulation and using your body to regulate your emotions at least 2 to 3 times a day, just tapping in. How am I feeling? That's
Yeah.
as simple as it gets. How am I feeling right now? Because our feelings are important.
Yeah.
I know you may not have been told that when you were a kid, right? But I'm telling you, as an adult, your feelings
Yeah.
matter.
And let me just want for 1 second make a comment on that before you carry on. Because for our listeners out there, it's not just when you were a kid. We are taught that effective leaders don't show emotion. Effective negotiators don't use emotion, as if it's a dirty word. And the
Yes.
opposite is true. When we're able to lean into the emotion, not just of ourselves, but understanding and truly seeking to understand the emotions that other people bring to the table, it allows us to get better outcomes and get more creative. So sorry to cut you off, but I totally agree with you. And I think we, that conditioning gets repeated throughout our life so that we see emotion as a weakness as opposed to learning to regulate it in healthy ways. So
Oh, I completely agree. Thank you for sharing that and adding more to it, because I think it's really important that people get both of our perspective, and really get these superpowers that they
yeah,
already have. Because if we're not utilizing these superpowers, then, and the second one is our intuition, which we talked quite a bit about,
yeah,
and how to tap into that. And the third one is really changing habits.
yeah,
I know that everyone has a habit that they want to change,
yeah,
whether it's exercising, stop scrolling social media, whatever your habit is, recognize the habit.
yeah.
And then once you recognize it, because it doesn't have to just be New Year's Eve that you have to be like, oh, I want to
That's
do a
so
habit,
true.
you know? I mean, and to be honest, I used to do that. That's why I know how this works, right? And so I want to show you that when you start taking those small steps and when you start changing one word to change your habit, and I'm
Yeah.
going to share that word with you in just a moment, but when you change this word, your whole life is going to change. And I'll tell you, when I changed this one word, I started to speak on stage because I overcame the fear.
Yeah.
I was on the NASDAQ billboard. I am about to write my book because I am saying I can and making choices from that space
Yeah.
rather than the I can't,
Yeah.
and thinking about my failures.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And kudos. That's so beautiful. And I love that you started that by talking about the fact that, I think we go through life expecting we're going to be able to control certain things. And so
Yeah.
many people we're conditioned where we try to exert control over things as opposed to recognizing that there's so much out there that we can't control, but we can choose how we react, right? But to any stimulus as well, and recognizing that, our reality is determined by our thoughts and the meaning we attach to them, which is why people in the same circumstances, some of them can approach it with joy and others with absolute dread and bitterness because of the thoughts and the meaning that you attach to them. So I think that's just so, so beautiful. And let's talk a bit about self-confidence. I mean, you present so confidently, it's beautiful. And I know that you've got a system that breaks down self-confidence into components that intrigue me. So can you tell our listeners a bit about that?
Yeah, so self-confidence, it definitely comes from within. And I had to work on my self-confidence because as a little girl growing up in the Indian community and growing up in America, right? Being Indian and then growing up in America, I was kind of torn between two worlds.
Yeah.
But that confidence, I didn't always have it. And so what I started to do was the little things where again, I would start saying yes to things rather than no, because my answer to everything was no, I can't. Or no, I'm too scared. There
Yeah.
was a deeper fear, and I had to tap into that fear because, for example, I was very scared of dogs.
Yeah.
And how I built my confidence around dogs, because now I have a dog.
Yeah.
I like to call her my doctor.
I love it.
and and so she, I had to recognize, what's the fear about? What's the belief
Yeah.
around that fear? And why am I limiting myself to what could be possible?
Yeah.
And I had to really dive deep and take the action towards the fear.
Yeah.
And every time that I would, because Cindy, it wasn't easy because I would run across the street if I saw a dog coming
That
a
sounded
mile
like my
away.
mom. I remember that growing up.
And yeah, and my mom, I mean, I was bit by a dog,
Oh,
number one, when I was young. And number two, I got in trouble for getting bit by the dog.
oh,
So it's that getting in trouble
yeah,
that imprinted and programmed in my body,
yeah,
not the fact that I got bit by the dog. Do you see
yeah,
how the mind works?
yeah,
Like we
yeah,
have these imprints in our body of what happened to us.
yeah,
And so we fear that confidence to do anything in our life.
yeah,
And so our experiences and our stories matter. And when I started to tell myself, I started to talk to myself, and we don't do that enough
yeah.
either.
That's true.
I started to say, everything's okay. You're going to be all right. And so then I started walking past the dog.
Yeah.
And then soon enough, I started to talk to the person who had the dog. And I'm like, you're going to be okay. And it would be quick, but I started to
Yeah,
take those little steps to get
yeah,
me beyond the fear, right?
yeah,
And that helped me build my confidence. And then my husband and my kids are like, can we get a dog?
yeah,
And so even though that fear still came up,
yeah.
but I was able to move past it.
Yeah. Well,
And
and again, I love that, and I want for our listeners to really pay attention to that because you hear what Deepal is saying. She made the profound change from, and I'm glad you use fear of dogs because people don't talk. I remember my mom growing up; she was terrified. She would drag us again, like you said, cross the street. I mean, just this horrific fear. And it's the stories we tell ourselves, right? And that applies to getting over past our fears, getting past our self-confidence issues, getting to a place of self-love. So most of the negative things they're all based on those stories we tell ourselves. So what a
and
beautiful and simple way to be able to flip our fears and increase our confidence. Go ahead.
and Cindy, the one thing when you were talking, I realized that a lot of times we don't realize whose fear it is.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it could be for me and for you, like you said, it's your mom's fear,
Yeah.
but it's so deeply ingrained within us.
Yes.
What do we do about it to
And
move
really, what you think,
beyond
our parents do it with all the best intentions, right?
it?
Even as
Yes,
you're
they
saying
do.
that, I'm thinking about the fears like, oh, don't try that. They don't want us to fail. And then they make
Exactly.
us feel like we're going to fail. So we embrace and absorb those fears. That's so true. So true. Now, you speak about kryptonite a lot. And I'd love if you could explain a bit about, how do we uncover it and how do we flip it from hurting us to helping us?
Right. So we all have a kryptonite. And for me, it was speaking on stage.
Ah,
And it was a deep fear because I had, again, experienced in high school where I was in a pageant and we had to talk about a leader, somebody that we look up to. Well, my leader that I believed in was Gandhi.
yeah.
And Gandhi was somebody who fought for freedom for India.
Yeah.
And I had written this beautiful speech. And what I realized is that when I got on stage, I literally said a sentence and then I stopped.
Ah,
And it became my kryptonite in my entire life because even when I was at work in the pharmaceutical industry, I had a boss that was very, very mean. And she would intimidate me. And she would put me down, and I felt like I was nobody. I felt like I was unseen, unheard. So one day, my intuition said, Deeple, you need to speak up to her.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, okay, fine. Because literally, I'd be on the toilets
Yeah.
crying, going, I want to quit
Yeah.
my job.
Yeah.
And I loved my job at that time. And so that day, I'm like, okay, great. Well, my boss comes into town. She's wanting to meet with me. We're sitting there having lunch. And she says, well, we need to talk about your review. And I was like, okay. And as we're speaking, she says, well, we would like to offer you the training position that you're in right now. And we'd like for you to keep this position.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, my intuition went, tell her now, tell her now. I said, literally out of my mouth, I finally opened my mouth and I said, no, I can't do it
Yeah.
because I feel this is how you make me feel.
Yeah.
This is what's happening. And she realized that, and everything turned around. And from that moment, I realized that, wow, I can use my voice
Yes. Yeah.
to get what I want
Yeah.
and what I deserve.
Yeah. I love that story. And
Yeah.
so important from both ends. And again, for our listeners, one, if you're on the receiving end and it's affecting how you show up, being able to step into your power, that sort of unapologetically empowered, as Deeple says, and be able to speak your truth is so valuable. And I also want to sort of cap it for our listeners. Because I think, many of you out there, if you're being really honest with yourself, may be at the other end of that equation where you're in a position of leadership and you've been conditioned to believe that leadership means exerting power over others and that you got to toughen everybody up to get the best out of them. And that's simply not true. It is simply not true. And, I hope we're going to enter a new era with a new leadership paradigm. And I really invite any of you who are in those leadership positions to think about, how do you make your team feel? Do you make them feel unapologetically empowered, or do you make them feel less confident in their ability to show up? So I love that story for that, because I think it really is powerful coming from both perspectives, right? Just wow. Now, what is your self-efficiency formula? That kind of tweaked my interest as well. I thought, that's an interesting concept. How does that work?
Self-efficiency. So my self-efficiency is basically tuning into me and taking care of myself because, I don't know if mentioned this, but I went through a whole body transformation last year.
Yeah.
And, I mentioned that, I believe.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of discipline,
Yeah.
you know and when we can realize that we can achieve certain goals in our lives, we feel so accomplished,
Yeah.
right? And then we start to accomplish more. And so I
Yes.
feel like that self-efficiency, like how efficient can I be? How can I break through my limits? How could I break through and reach certain potentials that I know I'm capable of,
Yeah.
but yet I'm not taking that action. So for me, it's all about taking action, because a lot of times I just wish something and I started to see that it wasn't happening.
Yeah.
So to me, self-efficiency is be in your own power,
Yeah.
know that who you are and where it could lead you just by doing that one thing
Yeah.
that is going to just move that pendulum along,
Yeah. Well, and I can see the power of that, particularly as we're seeing this sort of layering, like have that self-efficiency, and you layer onto that to be able to discover your kryptonite and change the story that you're telling around it, right? Discover those three superpowers, start to really embrace them and replace all of your shoulds and can'ts with,
Yeah.
can and more positive. I think that's fabulous. And, we talked about fear a few times here, and I think for a lot of people, it's often fear of success. If we're being
It
really
is.
get honest with ourselves, we're afraid about, what if I really succeed? And we rarely are conscious, I think. It's sort of playing under the subtext. So how's that going to affect my relationship with my friends or with my intimate partner?
Yeah.
How are the family going to look at me differently? So I love this, being able to embrace it. This has been just such a fun conversation and gone so fast for us, people. We'll have to have you back and explore, pull some of these threads in other directions as well. And I normally like to end by asking, what is one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've had in your life? Again, it doesn't have to be on this issue, just one of those aha moments that has you think differently and show up differently.
Yeah, for me, the mindset shift would just be saying yes to life, no
Mm,
matter what it is.
yeah,
Just say yes to it because you don't know where it's going to lead you. You don't
yeah,
know who's going to come into your life,
yeah,
and you don't know the impact that you're going to have on other people.
yeah.
So just say yes.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I love that you just said you don't know the impact you're going to have on other people. It is so true. And just the ripple effects of that, right? Even what I always just sort of intuitively make a point if I'm passing somebody and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I love your dress," or "You look fantastic in that," or
Yeah.
and you never know what that person is experiencing in that moment, and it takes so little to
Yes.
be kind.
Yes. I agree. I
To be
so agree
kind.
with that.
Yeah, beautiful. So where can people learn more about you, Deepa? Where should we be sending them?
Yeah, you could go to anandaforlife.com, ANANDA, the number for life.com, and you can actually take a 8 ultimate intuitive quiz
Oh,
because that quiz is going to help you really see what is your greatest superpower.
yeah,
And it's a lot of fun. So it's
yeah,
simply 8 questions, I believe,
yeah.
and they're fun and quick. And then you will receive some of our newsletters and get to be involved in a lot of the free stuff that we
Yeah.
have, as well as some of the paid stuff.
That's fabulous. And we will make sure don't panic if you're in the middle of doing something right now. We will make sure that that address is in our show notes as well. And I'm definitely going to go take that superpower quiz. So I encourage you when people offer things that have the potential to be able to shift your life to a more empowered state, take advantage of it. So thank you so much, Deepal, for being here and sharing your insights with us. You make it sound so simple, and the beauty is it is so simple if we allow ourselves to believe in moving into these shifts. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Cindy. It was a blessing and honor to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Likewise. And for our listeners, I have no doubt you got lots of value from this episode. Please give the gift of sharing. Share this episode with other people in your life. There are so many nuggets here, any one of which could be a game changer for somebody that you care about. So make sure to pass that on and share it with somebody that you think could get some value from it. And before we sign off, if you're looking to negotiate your best life, feel free to reach out as well. I've got everything from my online to my group to my mastermind signature VIP experiences to help you better leverage your innate power to get more of what you want and deserve in life. If that sounds interesting, check it out at artoffemininenegotiation.com and make sure to grab a copy of my book of the same name if you haven't done that yet, Art of Feminine Negotiation. It'll help you embrace this concept that all of life is a negotiation so you can show up with more intention. Much as Deepa has talked to us about here today as well, show up in your most intentional way so that you can design your life by choice. And that is a wrap for this episode. So until next time, go forth and negotiate your best life on your terms so you can stop missing out and you can start getting more of what you want and deserve from the boardroom to the bedroom. Until next time, take care.